When Ana de Armas and Tom Cruise got married, the lights of Paris shimmered softly that evening. Golden lamps lined the old stone streets, and every corner of the city seemed to glow in celebration. The world had been talking about it for months, the wedding of Ana de Armas and Tom Cruise. Reporters, fans, and even quiet dreamers across the world had waited for this day. It wasn't just a ceremony. It was a moment that felt like a movie coming alive. Inside the grand hall, chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars. White roses filled the air with a fragrance that made people close their eyes for a second, just to breathe in peace. Ana stood near the tall window, her reflection trembling in the glass. Her dress was simple, elegant, soft enough to move with her heartbeat. She looked happy, but her eyes had that deep stillness that comes when someone is thinking of a past they can't forget. The door behind her opened slowly. It was Tom, dressed in classic black, his usual confidence calm and controlled. He smiled as he walked in, but there was something about the silence between them, the kind that carried both love and fear. Love, because they had found each other through chaos. Fear, because they both knew the world was watching every breath they took. Tom reached for her hand. "You ready?" he said softly. Ana nodded, her voice gentle. "Yes, I just hope tonight feels real." Outside, photographers were already calling names. Flashes painted the sky like lightning. It was a night that could break anyone's heart. Beautiful, loud, unforgettable. But what no one knew was that far from the crowd, two other hearts were walking toward the same hall, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. They hadn't planned to come together. It had just happened. An old friend had sent them the same invite. And somehow, when they met in the lobby, the silence between them felt safer than any words. Keanu looked simple as always. Black suit, long hair slightly tied back, eyes tired but kind. Sandra wore a navy blue gown that whispered calm strength. When she smiled at him, it was soft, almost hesitant, as if time had circled back 20 years to the days when they first met on set. People turned when they entered the hall. Some whispered. Some smiled. There was something magnetic about them. Not romance, not fame, but an unspoken warmth that made everyone feel that kindness still existed in the world. As Ana and Tom exchanged vows, the camera lights flickered around them. Yet, at one corner of the hall, Keanu's quiet presence stole the lens. When Ana's eyes accidentally met his across the room, she paused for a second. Just a second, before continuing. It wasn't because of the past, but because of something deeper. The respect of shared history, of knowing what it means to love and lose and still smile. Sandra noticed it too. She leaned closer and whispered, "You okay?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, just remembering." And when Ana's voice trembled slightly during her vows, it wasn't nerves. It was memory of all the years she had fought to find herself, of the people who believed in her before the world did. And somewhere, deep in her heart, she knew Keanu was one of them. After the ceremony, music filled the garden. Fairy lights hung between olive trees and laughter wrapped the air like soft wind. Tom was shaking hands with guests, warm and proud. Ana tried to smile at everyone, but she kept glancing toward the far end of the garden, where Sandra and Keanu stood near the fountain, talking softly. Tom noticed. He walked to her, his voice calm. "They look good together, don't they?" Ana smiled faintly. "They always did." Then came a strange silence. Not awkward, just heavy. It was the kind of silence that hides a story. Because deep down, Ana remembered a time before Tom when life had been chaos, when heartbreak had almost broken her spirit. And in that darkness, Keanu had once said a single line she never forgot. "Some people don't stay to love you. They stay to remind you what love means." And tonight, those words felt alive again. As the music grew louder, Sandra laughed, a soft, real laugh that echoed like light. Keanu smiled for the first time in hours. It was gentle, almost invisible, but enough to make people turn their heads. Even the photographers noticed. Suddenly, the spotlight shifted, not intentionally but naturally. Every lens that had been fixed on Ana and Tom began to drift toward Keanu and Sandra. The quiet ones, the kind ones, the ones whose eyes said more than words ever could. The internet would call it the moment that stole the wedding. Memes, headlines, whispers, all saying the same thing. Keanu and Sandra, the couple who didn't even try to steal the show but did. But for the people there, it wasn't about glamour. It was about energy. Calm, honest, human. Anna watched them from afar and felt a strange peace. Tom placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She smiled. "Yeah. I think the spotlight found the right people tonight." The night ended with laughter and quiet glances. Sandra and Anna hugged softly near the exit, and Keanu shook Tom's hand like a brother. No drama, no pride, just respect. But deep inside, something had begun. Something none of them could name yet. Because beneath the calm of that wedding, stories from their pasts were waiting to rise again. And as the lights of Paris faded behind them, the journey that would test their humility, respect, and silent courage had only just begun. When the spotlight turned too bright, the next morning, Paris woke up to noise. Not the gentle kind that comes from cafes and birds, but the kind that comes from flashing headlines and buzzing phones. Every social media platform was flooded with the same pictures. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock standing together under the golden wedding lights, smiling softly. People weren't just talking about Anna and Tom anymore. The internet had already made a new story. Keanu and Sandra, the couple who stole the wedding. Anna sat by the window of her hotel room, wrapped in a white robe, her hair still slightly damp from the shower. She scrolled through the posts silently. Thousands of comments, millions of likes, and endless comparisons. Some called it a moment of nostalgia. Others said, Anna and Tom's wedding was beautiful. But Keanu and Sandra's chemistry won the night. Anna's heart tightened. She wasn't angry, she was confused. How could a single glance between two old friends take away the story she had waited her whole life to tell? Tom entered the room quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. He placed one near her and sat beside her without asking what she was reading. He already knew. The entire world knew. People always chase the quiet magic, he said after a pause. They see something honest and they can't look away. Anna turned to him. So we weren't honest? Tom shook his head softly. We were, but theirs. It felt real in a different way. Familiar. It reminded people of something they've missed. Gentle love, not loud. Anna sighed. Her fingers trembled as she locked her phone. I just wanted peace today. Not comparison. Tom smiled faintly. You will get peace, Anna, but not from the internet. Peace starts when you stop needing to explain yourself. His words were kind, but deep inside, Tom too felt a sting. He was proud, not jealous, yet somewhere in his heart he knew the truth. No matter how bright his name shone, the world still saw Keanu and Sandra as something timeless. They weren't just actors to people. They were symbols of kindness, resilience, and old-fashioned respect. And that kind of story never fades. That same afternoon, across the city, Sandra sat in a small cafe near the river. Her phone kept vibrating, but she ignored it. Keanu sat opposite her, his hair tied loosely, sipping black coffee, wearing his usual calm-like armor. Outside, fans had already gathered, trying to peek through the glass. We didn't do anything, Sandra said softly, her voice carrying both guilt and disbelief. We just stood there. Keanu smiled in his quiet way. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any movie script. She looked at him, eyes full of worry. But Anna and Tom, they must be upset. We didn't mean to take anything from them. Keanu leaned forward slightly. We didn't. People just see what they want to see. We can't control that. But even as he said it, a part of him knew how this would play out. He had been through the cycle before. Fame, misunderstanding, and media twisting kindness into controversy. He looked at Sandra, who was now staring at the river with tears she didn't want to show. She wasn't crying for herself. She was crying because she didn't want to hurt anyone again. By evening, the situation had exploded. Television shows were replaying the same 10 seconds from the wedding. Keanu and Sandra laughing near the fountain. Editors slowed it down, zoomed in, and added dramatic music. Headlines screamed, "Forgotten love rekindled." Paparazzi chased them through Paris streets, and online articles questioned everything. Was Sandra the secret reason for Keanu's quiet smile? Did Anna feel overshadowed by her guests? Anna and Tom decided to stay inside for the day. But silence doesn't stop curiosity. When Anna's friend called to ask how she was handling the spotlight theft, Anna finally said something that surprised even herself. "Maybe the world needs to talk about something that feels real," she whispered. If Keanu and Sandra reminded people that love can still be gentle, then maybe that's not bad. Tom looked at her, proud. He saw grace in her eyes, not pride, not jealousy, just maturity. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. Meanwhile, Keanu and Sandra decided to leave Paris quietly at night to avoid attention. They took a small flight to London, hoping for a few days of peace. But even on the plane, whispers followed them. A young girl sitting 2 rows behind leaned toward her mother and said, "Mom, are they together again?" The mother smiled. "No one knows, sweetie. But they look happy." Keanu heard it. He smiled faintly. Sandra noticed. "You think it's funny?" she asked, pretending to be annoyed. "A little," he replied. "People will always imagine stories. We just have to make sure we don't start believing them." She laughed quietly. "That's hard. You know how I am. I start feeling guilty for things I didn't even do." Keanu looked at her with warmth. "That's why people love you. Because you still care. Even when the world doesn't deserve it." She turned her face toward the window, hiding the soft tear that slipped down her cheek. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly. The plane lights blinked like tiny stars, and for a brief moment, everything felt peaceful again. But peace never lasts long in stories that test the heart. When they landed in London, a journalist was already waiting at the gate. The question came like lightning. "Keanu, Sandra, are you two in love again?" Both froze for a second. Keanu handled it with his usual calm. "We're just friends," he said simply. "Good friends who respect each other." But the journalist didn't stop. "Then why did Anna cry last night?" The words hit like a stone. Sandra's face changed. She whispered under her breath, "Anna cried?" Keanu stayed still, but inside, something shifted. A quiet storm. He didn't know if it was true, but he knew what guilt felt like. And that guilt would follow them through the next chapters of their lives. Back in Paris, Anna actually had cried, but not for the reason the world thought. She cried because she realized how fragile fame was, how easily beauty could turn into burden, how one night of joy could turn into 1,000 assumptions. She sat near the balcony, writing something in her notebook. A single line. Even light can hurt the eyes when it's too bright. And as she closed the book, she decided something silently. She would find her peace again, no matter what the world said. Tom came up behind her and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, we face it together." She nodded. "Always." But destiny had already written a twist they couldn't see, because in just a few days their paths would cross again with Keanu and Sandra in a way that none of them were ready for. And this time it wouldn't just be about fame. It would be about truth, forgiveness, and the courage to face what fame hides behind smiles. When 4 hearts met again, days passed, but the noise didn't fade. Every magazine, every talk show, every trending post carried the same names: Ana de Armas, Tom Cruise, Keanu Reeves, and Sandra Bullock. The world had turned their gentle smiles into stories of love, jealousy, and secret longing. None of them had asked for it. But once the internet starts dreaming, no one can stop it. In London, the air was cold and clear. Keanu and Sandra had rented a small flat near the River Thames, away from the luxury hotels, away from flashing cameras. The walls were bare, the floor creaked softly, and the windows looked out toward a bridge that glowed at night. For Keanu, it was peace. For Sandra, it was safety. But even peace can be heavy when silence becomes too deep. One evening, Sandra sat on the couch, scrolling through messages. Fans from around the world were writing to her. Some kind, some cruel. One message stopped her heart. "You should apologize to Anna. You ruined her wedding moment." She stared at the screen, her eyes full of quiet pain. She hadn't meant to hurt anyone. She had just smiled. One smile. And now that smile had become a storm. Keanu noticed her expression and sat beside her. "It's not your fault," he said softly. Then why does it feel like it is? She whispered. Because you care too much, he replied, and that's both your strength and your pain. Sandra leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Maybe I should talk to her. Face to face. No media, no public. Just honesty. Keanu looked at her for a long time. If that's what you need, I'll come with you. The next day, fate gave her that chance, not by plan, but by coincidence. A charity gala for children's hospitals was being held in London that weekend. The guest list was private, but their names had quietly appeared among the invitees. Anna and Tom had agreed to attend because the event supported a foundation Anna deeply cared about. Keanu and Sandra were invited by an old director friend. None of them knew the other would be there. The night arrived with soft rain. The city lights reflected off the wet streets like melted gold. Cameras waited outside the glass hall, but inside, the atmosphere was gentle. Candlelight, violin music, and quiet conversations. Anna entered first, her silver gown shining faintly under the soft lights. She looked calm, composed, like someone who had decided to face the world again. Tom walked beside her, polite as ever, nodding to guests with his easy charm. As they took their seats, Anna's heart suddenly slowed. Across the room, near the stage, she saw Keanu and Sandra. Time froze for a second. Memories flashed like lightning. The wedding night, the glances, the noise that followed. Keanu's eyes met hers. He gave a small nod. Respectful, not apologetic. Sandra looked away at first, then slowly turned back, her expression filled with quiet guilt. Anna didn't move. She simply exhaled and whispered, "It's okay." Tom looked at her. "You sure?" She nodded. "I need this moment." Later, during the dinner, the host announced that the foundation had reached its biggest milestone yet. Enough funds to open 2 new hospitals for children. The hall erupted in applause. People stood and clapped. It was a moment of real joy, and in that sea of emotion, something beautiful happened. Anna stood up and took the microphone. "I'm thankful to be part of something that gives hope," she said softly. "Life teaches us that light shines brightest when it comes from kindness, not from attention. And sometimes, the best stories are the quiet ones." Her eyes moved gently across the room, stopping for a second on Sandra and Keanu. She didn't mention them. She didn't need to. The warmth in her tone said everything. Sandra's hands trembled under the table. Keanu leaned closer and whispered, "You okay?" "No," she said honestly, "but I will be." When Anna finished speaking, the hall applauded again, not for her fame, but for her grace. People could feel something real in her voice, and for the first time since the wedding, the air between the 4 of them began to soften. After the dinner, while guests mingled, Sandra finally gathered the courage to walk across the hall. Every step felt heavy. When she reached Anna, she paused before speaking. "Hi," she said softly. Anna turned and smiled. A small, tired, genuine smile. "Hi." There was a long silence. The kind that comes when 2 hearts have carried misunderstanding for too long. Finally, Sandra spoke, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to take anything from you. I just wanted to see you happy." Anna's eyes softened. "I know, it just hurt to see how people twisted something pure." "I'm sorry," Sandra said. "For the noise, for the headlines, for everything." Anna shook her head. "Don't be. You reminded the world that kindness still looks beautiful. Maybe that's what the world needed." For a moment, both women stood still. 2 hearts, 2 stories, both scarred by fame, yet healed by understanding. When they hugged, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, short, but full of real peace. People in the hall noticed. Someone even took a picture. But this time, the story that spread the next morning wasn't gossip. It was hope. Ana de Armas and Sandra Bullock share emotional hug at charity event. No rivalry, only respect. Meanwhile, Tom and Keanu found themselves talking near the balcony, away from cameras. Tom looked at him with an honest smile. "You know, you made the world believe in real friendship again. Even if it came with chaos," Keanu chuckled softly. "I didn't mean to. It just happened." "That's the point," Tom said. "You don't have to try. You just live in truth. People feel it." Keanu looked out at the night sky, then said quietly, Truth is harder to carry when everyone wants a story. Tom nodded. But the ones who stay silent, they last longer. They both laughed quietly. Two men, different worlds, same understanding. Fame may fade, but character doesn't. As the event came to an end, Anna walked toward Keanu and Sandra. Her steps were slow but steady. She smiled softly. I guess we keep meeting by destiny. Keanu smiled back. Maybe destiny likes kind people. Anna laughed gently. Maybe. Or maybe it wants to test us a little more. Tom joined them, and for the first time, all four stood together. No cameras, no tension, no comparisons. Just calm air and the soft sound of rain outside. Then Anna said something that made them all fall silent. What if we do something good together? Not for headlines, not for fame. Just something kind that reminds the world what love and unity look like. Keanu looked at Sandra, who nodded quietly. Tom agreed too. And in that small moment, an idea was born. A shared project. A mission that would soon bring them closer than ever before. Not as actors, but as humans trying to heal the noise that fame had created. But destiny wasn't done yet. Because as they left the hall that night, a man standing outside in the rain clicked a single picture, the four of them together, smiling under one umbrella. The next morning, that photo would go viral, and though it looked perfect, it would open the door to something unexpected, a secret from Keanu's past that would soon shake everything again. When truth walked into the light, the next morning London woke up to rain again. But this time, the sound of rain wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the world was whispering about something it shouldn't have known. On every social platform, one photo had taken over the internet: Keanu Reeves, Sandra Bullock, Ana de Armas, and Tom Cruise standing under one umbrella, smiling softly outside the charity hall. People called it the kindness picture. Millions shared it. Journalists wrote long essays about how four stars could teach the world peace and unity, but as the photo spread, something else surfaced from the shadows, a forgotten story from Keanu's past. A blog post appeared online written by an unknown source. The headline was quiet but dangerous. The truth behind Keanu's kindness? A promise he couldn't keep. Within hours, it exploded. Fans began searching. News anchors began questioning, and old memories that Keanu had buried years ago started to rise again. That afternoon, Keanu sat alone in the small flat by the river. The rain kept hitting the glass softly. His phone was full of missed calls, agents, journalists, even old friends. He didn't move. He just stared at one message that had been sent to him from a private number. It said, "You promised her you would never forget." But you did. The words felt like fire. They burned quietly without flames. Sandra entered the room holding 2 cups of tea. When she saw his face, she froze. What happened? He turned the phone toward her. She read the message and frowned. Who is this? Keanu didn't answer. He just looked at the rain and said softly, Someone from my past. Sandra placed the cups on the table and sat beside him. Do you want to tell me? He nodded slowly, his voice calm but full of weight. Years ago, before I met you on set, I knew someone, a young actress. Her name was Claire. She was new, nervous, kind. I helped her with auditions, small things. She reminded me of innocence in a world that often forgets it. She once told me she wanted to make a movie about kindness. We promised we'd make it together. He paused, his eyes distant. But before we could, she got sick. Cancer. She called me one night from the hospital, but I was filming overseas. I said I'd visit soon. I didn't. She passed away a week later. His voice broke quietly. I didn't even attend her funeral. Sandra listened in silence, her eyes filling with tears. So the promise? Yeah, he whispered. The promise was the film we never made. I guess someone who knew her wants the world to remember. That evening, Anna and Tom were in their London hotel when they saw the same headline on TV. Tom turned the volume down, but Anna said, Keep it on, the reporter was saying. A mysterious letter and unseen photos from years ago reveal that Keanu Reeves once supported a young actress's dream, but failed to keep a promise before she passed away. The tone wasn't cruel, but it was sharp. It made something personal sound like a crime. Anna looked at Tom and said softly, "He doesn't deserve this." Tom nodded. "No one does. But people love turning pain into entertainment." Anna thought for a long moment, then picked up her phone. "Maybe it's time we remind them of who he really is," she texted Sandra. "I saw the news. If he's okay, tell him I believe in his promise. Maybe it's not too late to keep it." Sandra read the message and showed it to Keanu. He stared at it for a long time. "She's right," she said quietly. "Maybe it's not too late." He looked at her, half smiling through the ache. "You think the world would listen now?" "Not the world," she said. "But maybe one child, one dreamer, one heart that still believes in goodness. That's enough." Her voice carried something powerful. Simple truth, no drama. And for the first time in years, Keanu felt like maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. Maybe it was about finally facing it. The next day, Keanu made a choice. He called Anna and Tom and asked to meet. They agreed immediately. They met in a small art studio near the river. No cameras, no noise, just four people who had been through storms together. Keanu stood near the window, the light falling softly on his face. "I want to make that film," he said. "The one I promised Claire. But not alone. I want it to be real. Something that reminds people what kindness looks like when no one is watching." Anna smiled gently. "I'll produce it with you." "We'll call it her dream," Tom nodded. "And I'll handle the funding quietly. No big studio. We keep it pure." Sandra looked at him with eyes that said everything. "I'll stand beside you this time, every step." For a moment, the room was silent. Not empty, just sacred. 4 souls. Different journeys. One purpose. That night, as the city lights reflected in the river, they stayed in the studio, planning scenes, writing small notes, sharing old memories. Sandra watched Keanu as he spoke about Claire, the way his voice trembled slightly, the way he chose his words with care. There was no guilt left, only grace. Anna watched too, realizing something deeper, that real peace doesn't come when the world forgets your past, but when you stop hiding from it. Tom poured them tea and said quietly, "Sometimes a broken promise can still become a blessing, if it leads you back to your truth." Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe that's what this story is, a second chance. But not everyone saw it that way. As news spread that Keanu and Anna were working on a mysterious project together, some corners of the internet twisted it again. Is Anna helping Keanu fix his image? False stories, fake interviews, wild theories. It was chaos again, but this time none of them ran away. They stayed calm, silent, focused. Sandra handled most of the media quietly, with soft honesty. She said in one interview, "It's not about image, it's about healing, and maybe the world could use a little more of that." Her words went viral, not for scandal, but for truth. People began to change tone. Even critics softened. Soon, donations started pouring in for the foundation they had built around the film's cause, a program to support young dreamers in the film industry. They called it Claire's Promise. Months passed. The film took shape, not a blockbuster, not a spectacle, but something real. It showed simple people helping each other, quiet moments of kindness, love that expected nothing. And when the movie finally premiered, the audience didn't clap at first. They sat in silence, eyes wet, hearts full. Then they stood up all at once and applauded, not the stars, but the soul of the story. After the screening, Keanu walked out to the river with Sandra. The night was calm, the same way it had been the night he first told her the truth. "You think she saw it?" he asked softly. Sandra looked up at the stars. "I think she was there all along. Every scene, every smile, every light." Keanu smiled, this time with peace. "Then I finally kept my promise." And for the first time in years, the quiet inside him didn't hurt anymore. But as the world celebrated Claire's promise, destiny wasn't done weaving its web. A journalist digging through old footage would soon find something unexpected. An old letter written by Claire herself, addressed not just to Keanu but to someone else among the 4, and that letter would change everything again. When the letter found its way home, the sun was just rising over Los Angeles when an envelope arrived at a quiet office on Melrose Avenue. It was addressed in faded blue ink, the kind that looked like it had been written years ago. The handwriting was delicate, almost trembling. On the corner of the paper, a small name was printed, Claire Anderson. The assistant at the office didn't think much of it at first, just another old fan letter, maybe delayed in the mail. But when she saw the name Keanu Reeves written gently on the back of the envelope, she paused. The postmark was from a small town in Oregon dated 8 years ago. She didn't open it. Instead, she contacted Keanu's team and forwarded it right away. 2 days later, in a small cafe in Los Angeles, Keanu sat quietly with Sandra, Anna, and Tom. They were meeting to discuss the next charity plans after the success of Claire's Promise. The movie had touched hearts all over the world. Donations were flowing in. People were finally remembering kindness instead of chaos. Then Keanu's phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. "A letter arrived for you." "From Claire?" His hand froze. Sandra looked at him immediately. "From Claire?" Keanu nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "It's real. The handwriting. It's hers." The cafe felt smaller, quieter. Even the sound of the coffee machine faded. He took a deep breath. "I'll read it with you," he said, looking at Sandra. "If that's okay." She nodded softly. "Always." That evening, they gathered in the same art studio near the river where Claire's Promise had been born. The lights were dim, the air still. Keanu sat on the wooden table, the envelope trembling slightly in his hand. Anna and Tom stood close by, silent, respectful. Sandra sat across from him, eyes full of empathy and something else. Fear. Keanu broke the seal. Inside was a folded page, slightly yellowed at the edges. The first words were written in soft cursive. "Dear Keanu, if you are reading this, I am probably gone. But please don't be sad. I left this letter not to haunt you, but to thank you for every kind word you ever spoke to me." His eyes blurred for a second, but he continued reading aloud. "I know you couldn't come when I was sick. I know you were far away, but I never blamed you. You gave me hope when I had none. You made me believe I could still create something beautiful even if I didn't live to see it. That's why I left something behind for you." Keanu stopped reading. His voice broke softly. "There's more," Sandra whispered gently. He nodded, his eyes wet. "The truth is, I didn't want you to make the film alone. I wanted someone else to be part of it. Someone who once visited me when you couldn't. She brought flowers, held my hand, and told me she would make sure you never forgot your promise." Her name was Sandra. The room fell silent. No one breathed. Keanu looked up slowly, his eyes wide in disbelief. "You," he said softly, looking at Sandra. She looked down, tears already in her eyes. "I didn't tell you," she whispered. "I didn't know how." Anna and Tom stood still, their faces filled with quiet shock. Keanu placed the letter on the table and leaned back, his mind spinning. "You knew her?" he asked, his voice breaking between anger and heartbreak. Sandra nodded, her voice trembling. "I met her once. After you told me about her years ago before she got sick. I went to see her when you were filming in Japan. I didn't want to interfere, but she was so alone. I just wanted to comfort her. She told me she believed in your kindness. I promised her I'd remind you of it one day." Keanu's hands covered his face. His shoulders trembled, not from rage, but from the pain of realizing that two people he had loved and lost were connected in ways he never knew. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. Sandra wiped her tears. "Because I thought it would hurt you. And maybe deep down I was scared you'd think I tried to replace her." He looked at her, eyes full of emotion. No one could replace her. "But you didn't. You kept her promise alive." She shook her head. "No, Keanu. You did." Anna slowly picked up the letter and continued reading the last paragraph in a trembling voice. "If someday you make our film, please include her, because she carries the same light you do. The quiet kind. The one that saves people without asking for thanks. Tell her I was never afraid of leaving, because people like you and her make this world gentle again." Tears streamed down Sandra's face. Even Tom, silent all this time, turned away to wipe his eyes. Keanu sat still, his chest rising slowly as he took a deep breath. "She forgave me," he said quietly. "She always did," Sandra replied. He smiled faintly. "And she brought you into it. Maybe that was her plan all along, to make sure kindness never died with her." Anna looked at them both and said softly, "Then let's finish what she started." A week later, they announced the creation of the Claire Foundation, an international nonprofit to support young artists battling illness, giving them a chance to create before it's too late. The world embraced it with open hearts. Celebrities, students, and dreamers from around the globe joined. In interviews, Keanu spoke gently about Claire, but this time, he also spoke about Sandra. "Sometimes kindness hides in silence," he said. "She visited Claire when I couldn't. That's the kind of love the world needs to see." Sandra stood beside him, her eyes glowing softly. Anna and Tom smiled proudly behind them, knowing they were witnessing something rare. Two souls healing not through words, but through action. But not everyone saw only peace. The press, hungry for drama, began twisting the story again. "Old love reignited?" they asked. Did Claire's letter bring Keanu and Sandra closer again? The noise started to grow once more. Endless speculations, emotional videos, comparisons, analysis. Keanu didn't answer any of it. Neither did Sandra. They simply kept working, visiting hospitals, funding scholarships, mentoring young filmmakers. Their silence became their loudest answer. And slowly, something remarkable happened. People stopped gossiping. They started helping. Kindness spread like quiet fire. The internet, for the first time, turned soft. Messages poured in from people who had once lost hope, letters from nurses, teachers, and even children. One little girl from India wrote, "Dear Keanu and Sandra, I don't know Claire, but I think I want to be like her. Thank you for showing us that promises can still be kept." Sandra read that letter to Keanu one evening, her voice full of gentle emotion. He smiled. "See? Claire's still speaking," through every heart she touched. That night, as they walked by the riverside again, the sky was full of stars. Anna and Tom had already gone back to Los Angeles, preparing for their next project. But Keanu and Sandra stayed behind, not as actors, not as lovers, but as two souls who had carried light through darkness. Keanu looked at her. "You kept a promise for me once. Now let me make one for you." She smiled faintly. "And what promise is that?" He looked up at the stars. "That I'll never forget how grace looks when the world tries to twist it." She blinked away a tear. "Then we're even." They both laughed softly, their voices blending with the sound of the water. Peaceful, human, real. But somewhere far away, in a quiet archive room of an old hospital, a woman was opening a box marked Claire Anderson Personal Items. Inside it was an old video cassette. On the cover, in faded ink, it said, "For Keanu and Sandra, my last story." And soon, that tape would surface, carrying Claire's final message, a message that would change their lives one last time. When Claire's voice returned, the morning was silent when the call came. Keanu was in his garden, watering the small plants he had grown himself, lavender, daisies, and jasmine. The phone buzzed softly on the wooden table beside him. It was Anna. Her voice carried both excitement and disbelief. "We found something," she said. "From Claire." Keanu froze. "What do you mean?" "An old videotape," Anna replied. It was stored in a hospital archive. The label said, "For Keanu and Sandra, my last story." "They want us to collect it." His heart skipped a beat. He whispered, "She left us a message." Within hours, they were all together again. Keanu, Sandra, Anna, and Tom, sitting in a quiet room at the hospital. A nurse brought out a small gray box, the kind used for storing old records. Inside was the cassette. The tape looked fragile, time-stained, as if it had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. Sandra held it gently in her hands, her eyes wet. "I can't believe she thought of us even then." Keanu nodded softly. She never stopped believing in kindness, even when the world forgot her. They placed the tape into an old player the hospital staff had set up. The screen flickered to life. First static, then a soft image appeared. Claire sat in a hospital bed, sunlight falling across her face. Her hair was thin, her smile small but bright. She looked tired, but her eyes still carried that quiet spark. "Hi," she said softly into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. But that's okay. I wanted to say thank you, both of you, for being kind to me when no one else was. Keanu, you taught me that silence can heal. Sandra, you showed me that kindness doesn't need permission." Keanu's hand covered his mouth. Sandra's tears flowed freely. The room was silent except for Claire's voice. Fragile, real, alive. She continued, "I used to think fame was the goal. But I was wrong. Love was. Not romantic love. The kind that makes the world gentle again. You both have that gift. Don't let it fade. Use it." She paused, took a slow breath, and smiled faintly. "One day, you'll both stand on the same stage again. Maybe not for a movie, but for something bigger. When that happens, tell people my story. Not because I was special, but because I believed in you. I believed that people who live with kindness never really die." The tape flickered again. Claire coughed softly, then whispered her final words. "If you ever make another film, don't make it about me. Make it about the people who still believe that gentle hearts can change the world." The screen turned to white. No one spoke for several minutes. The silence was heavy but peaceful, like the moment after a storm. Keanu looked at Sandra, her face pale, her eyes shining with quiet understanding. She knew. He whispered, "She knew this would reach us when we were ready." Sandra nodded. "And maybe we are now." Anna placed her hand on the table. "Then let's do what she asked. Let's tell stories that keep hearts alive." Tom smiled faintly. "And let's make sure the world remembers the power of gentleness." Months passed, and together they launched a new project, Gentle Hearts. It wasn't a movie this time. It was a global initiative. Short films made by young artists from every corner of the world, each telling stories of kindness, empathy, and forgiveness. The foundation funded it entirely through donations raised from Claire's promise. The first film was a simple one, about a nurse who stayed late to comfort an old patient who had no family. It lasted only 6 minutes, but when it was uploaded online, millions watched it in silence. Comments poured in from around the world. "This reminded me of my grandmother," I cried, but it gave me hope again. "Thank you for making something that feels human." The movement spread faster than any of them expected. Schools, hospitals, even small communities began creating their own Gentle Heart stories. Kindness became news again. Not scandals, not fights, just soft reminders that humanity still existed. One evening, months later, Keanu and Sandra stood on a small stage at an event for the foundation. Anna and Tom were there too, smiling proudly among the audience. Keanu looked out at the crowd, children, families, dreamers, and began to speak. "Years ago, someone taught us that promises are not about perfection. They're about remembering what matters." A young woman named Claire believed that gentle souls could change the world. Tonight, we're proof that she was right. He looked at Sandra, who stepped forward and continued softly. "We spend our lives chasing attention, but the truth is, peace comes from giving it away. When you choose kindness, you light a candle that never goes out." The audience stood and applauded, but the applause wasn't loud. It was soft, warm, respectful, the kind of sound that fills hearts rather than rooms. Later, after everyone left, the four of them stayed behind, sitting quietly on the edge of the stage. Anna smiled and said, "You know what's strange? Claire's story started everything, but now it belongs to everyone." Tom nodded. "That's how you know it's real. It stopped being about us long ago." Keanu looked toward the empty seats and said softly, "She's probably laughing right now." Sandra smiled through tears. "Then let her. She earned it." They laughed quietly together. The sound echoing softly in the empty hall. Outside, the city lights reflected on the quiet water, just like they had in Paris. In London, and in every place their paths had crossed, the world had changed. Not because of fame, but because 4 people had chosen to stay gentle even when the world wasn't. Years later, Gentle Hearts had become a global foundation helping thousands of dreamers. Every film ended with the same words, Claire's last line, "People who live with kindness never really die." And somewhere in that truth, Keanu found peace, Sandra found forgiveness, Anna found clarity, and Tom found purpose. Their lives moved forward, but their hearts stayed connected, not by fame, not by headlines, but by a single promise that outlived time itself.